The warm Los Angeles night buzzed with energy as Snoop Dogg reclined in the plush seat of his Cadillac Escalade. The soft hum of the city created the perfect backdrop for what should have been a night of celebration. With the new album receiving rave reviews and his closest friends ready to toast to success, the evening promised nothing but good vibes. He glanced down at his phone as a message from Jason, his manager and longtime confidant, lit up the screen. "We're outside the spot, man. Can't wait to see what you've picked." Grinning, Snoop replied, "Hold tight, pulling up now." His crew deserved this moment. They'd been by his side through the long studio nights, grueling tours, and the constant hustle of the industry. Tonight wasn't just about the wins, it was about gratitude, relaxation, and reconnecting. As he rolled up to the valet of Eminence Dining, the restaurant's exterior gleamed with understated opulence. Its clean, minimalist design and sleek glass panels exuded exclusivity. Adjusting his tailored suit, Snoop stepped out, immediately spotting Jason, Tina, and two rising stars from his label waiting near the entrance. "Snoop Dogg's in the house," Jason called out, pulling him into a hearty handshake, turned a hug. The group erupted into laughter, trading inside jokes and light-hearted jabs as they made their way to the restaurant's grand double doors. Inside, the ambiance was immaculate. Crystal chandeliers bathed polished mahogany tables in a warm glow, and soft jazz melodies floated through the air. Servers glided effortlessly between tables, their movements refined and their uniforms pristine. Though luxury was no stranger to Snoop, the restaurant's carefully curated sophistication was palpable, even to him. Approaching the hostess stand, he flashed his trademark grin. "Reservation for dog party of 6. The hostess, a young woman with a sleek ponytail and a professional detachment, glanced at her screen. Her composed expression wavered briefly before she straightened. "One moment, sir." Tina leaned in, her voice low. "She gave us that y'all don't belong here look. Did you see it?" Snoop shrugged casually. "Probably just double-checking. You know how these fancy joints can be." Minutes ticked by and the hostess returned. Her demeanor had shifted, becoming noticeably cooler. "I'm sorry, Mr. Dogg," she said, avoiding eye contact. "There seems to have been a mix-up with your reservation. We don't have a table available tonight." The air around them changed instantly. Jason crossed his arms, his voice tinged with disbelief. "Hold up, that can't be right. We confirmed this reservation this morning." The hostess maintained her composed tone. "Unfortunately, we're fully booked for the evening. My apologies for the inconvenience." Tina stepped forward, her frustration unmistakable. "Fully booked? We just walked by and saw plenty of empty tables. What's really going on?" The hostess's lips tightened into a practiced smile. "Those tables are reserved for other guests." Tension hung thick. Snoop remained composed, though an anger simmered beneath his calm exterior. "Look, I get that mistakes happen, but we've had this reservation for weeks. Could you double-check?" Before the hostess could respond, a man in a sharp suit appeared, his polished demeanor and condescending smile signaling his authority. "Is there a problem here?" he asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. Snoop turned to face him, his voice steady but pointed. "Yeah, apparently our reservation disappeared. Care to explain how that happened?" The man's cold smile didn't falter. "Mr. Dogg, I apologize for the confusion, but we must adhere to our reservation policy. Unfortunately, we're at capacity tonight." Jason bristled, his voice rising. "You're seriously turning away Snoop Dogg? Do you even know who this man is?" The manager's condescension sharpened. "Here at Eminence Dining, we treat all our guests equally." Snoop felt the weight of stares from nearby diners. Whispers rippled across the room as recognition spread. The burn of humiliation was unmistakable. This wasn't just a mishap. It was something deeper, something uglier. "Let's go," Snoop said, his voice low but resolute. "Mwah," Tina began, but he cut her off. "I said, let's go." The group followed him out, their excitement for the evening now shattered. Outside, the city lights seemed harsher, colder. Snoop inhaled deeply, trying to quell the anger roiling inside him. He had faced plenty of battles in his life, but this one cut differently. It wasn't about a missed dinner reservation. It was about what he stood for, what they had tried to diminish. As they climbed into the car, the silence was thick, unspoken emotions filling the space. No one knew how to begin to address what had just unfolded. Tina finally broke the silence. her voice cutting through the tension. "This isn't right. We can't just let them get away with this." Snoop nodded, his jaw clenched tightly. "Oh, we won't, trust me, we won't." The car roared to life as they drove away from the gleaming exterior of Eminence Dining. The rhythm of the city outside barely registered. Snoop stared out the window, his mind churning. This wasn't the first time he had encountered this kind of quiet, insidious discrimination. It wasn't just about being a celebrity, it was about being a black man in a world that still wanted to dictate where he did and didn't belong. By the time they reached Tina's place, the atmosphere in the car had only grown heavier. As she stepped out, she paused and looked back at him. "You know what you have to do," she said firmly. Her words lingered long after the door shut, echoing in the stillness. When Snoop finally returned home, the silence felt oppressive. His phone buzzed endlessly with incoming messages, texts from friends, social media notifications, and an outpouring of reactions from fans who had already caught wind of the incident. He sat in his living room, his phone resting in his hands. The anger that had burned earlier had shifted into something more focused, a deep sense of resolve. This wasn't something he could ignore, not for himself, not for his crew, and certainly not for his community. Finally, he opened the camera app, took a steadying breath, and hit record. "Tonight," he began, his voice calm but charged with emotion, "something happened that I can't stay quiet about." As he spoke, the weight of the night poured out of him. It wasn't just about the incident at Eminence Dining. It was about a lifetime of being made to feel unwelcome, of being told where he could and couldn't belong. It was about everyone who had ever faced humiliation, exclusion, or outright disrespect because of the color of their skin. When he finished, he uploaded the video with a simple caption, "It's time for change." The video went live, and Snoop knew there was no turning back. The following morning, he was jolted awake by the relentless buzzing of his phone. Notifications poured in, one after another, flooding every platform. Fans, friends, and even strangers had responded to his post, their messages filled with raw emotion. He scrolled through the comments, each one sharpening the memory of the previous night. "This is exactly why we have to speak out," read one. "They think they can treat us however they want because of the color of our skin," said another. Mixed in were personal stories from others who had faced similar indignities, being ignored, scrutinized, or outright denied access in restaurants, stores, and public spaces. The words were like a collective cry, painful and unfiltered. Snoop felt a familiar ache in his chest. He had endured these injustices his entire life, but now, it wasn't just about him. It was about everyone who had ever been told they didn't belong. By midday, the video had exploded. Clips of his heartfelt message were everywhere, shared across platforms. Headlines screamed his name, placing Snoop Dogg at the heart of a growing storm of outrage. Eminence Dining was now under fire, their name linked to accusations of racism. Their Instagram page was flooded with angry comments, their ratings bombarded with one-star reviews. This wasn't just backlash, it was an awakening. Jason called, his voice alive with a mix of anger and urgency. "Bro, have you seen this? Your videos everywhere, people are pissed, like full-on boycott pissed." Snoop rubbed the back of his neck, still processing the overwhelming response. "I've seen it," he replied. "People are sharing their stories, man. This is way bigger than me." "Exactly," Jason said, his voice crackling with energy. "This ain't just about last night. It's about all the times we got turned away, disrespected, treated like we didn't belong. This is the moment. We've got to do something." Snoop leaned back in his chair, staring out at the city skyline. Los Angeles buzzed as usual, but tonight, it felt different. There was something electric in the air, a simmering anger that was ready to erupt into action. "You're right," Snoop said after a moment. "But it can't just be about calling them out. We need to show them what we're about. Build something they can't ignore." Jason's enthusiasm was palpable. "Say the word, man. I'm all in, whatever it takes." After the call, Snoop sat alone, his thoughts racing. He thought about every time he'd faced that quiet, unspoken judgment. The side eyes, the extra scrutiny, the invisible lines that told him where he did and didn't belong. It was exhausting, but this time he wasn't standing alone. This time, people were listening. Tina arrived at Snoop's house later that day, her face filled with determination. "Have you seen the comments?" she asked, settling into the chair he motioned to. "People are fired up. We can't let this energy fizzle out." Snoop nodded, resting his hands on the back of a chair. "I know. Jason's been blowing up my phone. Boycotts, protests, the whole deal." Tina leaned forward, her eyes blazing with passion. "Boycotts? Protests? We've done all that before, and where has it gotten us? No, we need something bigger, something that says, we don't need their tables, because we can build our own." Snoop raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "All right, I'm listening. What's the play?" "A dinner," she said, her voice gaining momentum. "But not just any dinner. A night that celebrates everything they tried to deny us. Our culture, our food, our music. We bring together the top chefs, the most talented artists, and the best musicians. We make it something so powerful they can't ignore it. Call it a table for all." The phrase hung in the air like a spark, and Snoop let it ignite a smile. "A table for all," he repeated. "That's it. I like it." For the next hour, they sketched out the foundation of their idea. It would be more than just a response to what had happened at Eminence Dining. It would be a statement, a celebration of identity, resilience, and community. As Tina listed off potential chefs and venues, Snoop's mind raced ahead, envisioning something far bigger. This wasn't just about one dinner. This was about creating a legacy, something that would inspire others to take similar action. By evening, news of the planned dinner had already begun to spread. Tina's post on social media had gone viral, with thousands of people sharing it and tagging their favorite chefs, artists, and musicians. The excitement was electric. People weren't just craving food, they were yearning for a space where they could feel seen, valued, and celebrated. Jason called, his voice nearly breathless with excitement. "Bro, did you see Tina's post? People are losing it. We've got chefs volunteering, artists offering to donate their work, and musicians hitting me up left and right to perform. This thing's already on fire." Snoop grinned, his chest swelling with pride. "Good, let's show them what we're really about." But as the excitement mounted, so did the resistance. Late that night, Eminence Dining released a carefully worded statement. It was loaded with corporate jargon, misunderstanding, commitment to diversity, and sincere apology for any inconvenience caused. Tina texted Snoop a screenshot of the statement with one simple line, "They're scared, good." Snoop stared at her message for a long moment, the words resonating deeply. They were scared, and they should be. This wasn't about a single night of exclusion. This was about years, even decades of systemic racism. It was about a society that had long dictated who deserved a seat at the table and who didn't. He set his phone down and gazed out at the city lights. A part of him wanted to let the anger consume him, to watch the establishment that had disrespected him crumble under the weight of public scrutiny. But another part, the wiser, more reflective part, knew that wasn't the answer. This wasn't just about tearing something down, it was about building something better. Snoop understood that the path forward wouldn't be easy. There would be challenges, resistance, and critics. But he also knew that the opportunity to create something meaningful was too powerful to ignore. The next morning, Snoop sat at his kitchen table, a steaming cup of coffee in hand. Before him lay a notebook filled with ideas, each more ambitious than the last. The phrase Tina had coined the day before, "a table for all," felt like more than a catchy title. It was a manifesto. It was a rejection of the exclusionary practices places like Eminence Dining stood for, and a declaration of something far greater, a space where everyone, no matter their background, could feel celebrated. As he jotted down his thoughts, his phone buzzed incessantly, texts, emails, and a flood of notifications from social media. His world was on fire, with people offering their support, sharing their own stories, and asking how they could contribute. The energy was unstoppable, and Snoop knew they had to act quickly to harness it. By early afternoon, Tina arrived, a laptop tucked under one arm and an energy drink in hand. She breezed past small talk, diving straight into work. "I've already spoken to a couple of chefs," she announced, setting up at the dining room table. "They're in, and not just for the food, they want to help with everything, promotions, decor, logistics, the whole 9 yards. Snoop nodded, feeling the momentum building like a tidal wave. This wasn't just an idea anymore, it was a movement. Snoop leaned back in his chair, a slow smile spreading across his face. This is it. This ain't just about food. It's about proving what's possible when we come together. The three of them spent hours brainstorming, ideas flowing freely as they shaped the event into something extraordinary. Tina's network of musicians was ready to provide soulful performances, while Snoop tapped into his vast connections with artists and creatives across Los Angeles. Their vision expanded into a celebration that would honor not only Black culture but also the vibrant diversity that defined the city. By mid-afternoon, Jason arrived, his energy as lively as ever. Clapping his hands together, he announced, "All right, y'all, I've been working the phones. We've got some heavy hitters interested. A couple of downtown venues are open, but we gotta move quick. This thing is catching fire." Snoop arched an eyebrow. "Heavy hitters, huh? Who we talking about?" Jason grinned, his expression mischievous. "Trust me, you'll see. Let's just say people are gonna be talking about this one for a long time." They worked late into the evening, finalizing plans and ironing out the details. They settled on a converted warehouse in the heart of the city, an industrial space with exposed beams and concrete floors that could be transformed into something magical. It was the perfect blank canvas, ready to reflect the creativity and resilience of the community they were building. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Snoop leaned back in his chair, exhausted but invigorated. "This isn't just a dinner," he said thoughtfully. "It's a statement. We're showing them we don't need their approval to make something great. We're doing it for us." Tina nodded, her eyes shining with determination. "And we're doing it our way." By the time Jason headed out for the night, they had a venue locked down, a growing roster of chefs and performers, and a clear vision of what the evening would look like. Now, all that remained was bringing it to life. The following days were a whirlwind of activity. Tina and Jason threw themselves into coordinating logistics while Snoop used his platform to promote the event. Each video he posted about the importance of community and inclusion was met with overwhelming support. The comments overflowed with stories from people who had faced similar experiences, turned away, overlooked, made to feel invisible. One story struck Snoop deeply. A young woman named Anaka shared how she and her family had been turned away from a restaurant the previous year, even though they had a reservation. She described the humiliation of standing there as others stared, the sinking feeling of walking away, knowing there was nothing they could do. During a late-night planning session, Snoop read Anaka's words aloud to Tina and Jason. His voice was thick with emotion as he finished. "This is why we're doing this," he said, setting the phone down. "It ain't just about what happened to us. It's about everyone who's ever been made to feel like they didn't belong." The night before the event, the warehouse buzzed with activity. Chefs were busy setting up makeshift kitchens along one wall, unpacking ingredients and perfecting their dishes. Long rows of tables were covered with crisp white linens, adorned with simple floral arrangements. String lights hung overhead, casting a warm, inviting glow across the space. At the far end of the room, their melodies filling the air with excitement and anticipation. Snoop stood at the center of it all, taking in the scene. It was exactly what he had envisioned, a space that felt both elegant and welcoming, where people could come together and feel at home. Jason joined him, surveying the setup with his hands on his hips. "Man, this is something else," he said, a hint of awe in his voice. "You think they're ready for this?" Snoop smiled, his gaze steady. "They ain't ready. But they're about to be." Moments later, Tina appeared, clipboard in hand. "Everything's on track," she reported, her tone brisk. "Chefs are good, performers are ready, and we've got people lined up to document the whole thing." Snoop nodded. "Good, this ain't just about tonight. We gotta show the world what we're about." As the final details came together, Snoop stepped outside for a moment of quiet reflection. The cool night air offered a brief reprieve from the bustling energy inside. He thought about everyone who had shared their stories, who had poured their hearts out in the comments of his posts. This wasn't just for him or his friends, it was for them, for every person who had ever been turned away, for every family who had felt the sting of silent prejudice. This wasn't just a dinner, it was a movement, a revolution. Tomorrow, they would show the world exactly what a table for all truly meant. The evening had arrived, and the once plain warehouse in downtown Los Angeles had been transformed into a radiant celebration of art, culture, and community. String lights draped overhead cast a warm golden hue across the room, while long, elegant tables dressed in crisp white linens stretched invitingly through the space. Fresh floral arrangements and flickering candles adorned each table, creating an ambiance that was both sophisticated and welcoming. The air buzzed with the mingling aromas of cuisines from around the world, a delicious symphony of spices and flavors hinting at the night's culinary journey. Guests began to arrive, each one greeted personally by Snoop Dogg and his close friends. Every handshake, smile, and hug carried the weight of gratitude, their presence a reminder of the resilience and strength of the community. Among the attendees were well-known artists, chefs, and activists, as well as everyday people drawn by the event's message. Despite their varied backgrounds, they shared a common thread: the experience of being excluded, overlooked, or diminished in spaces where they should have been embraced. The energy in the room was electric, a mix of excitement and anticipation. Laughter and conversation filled the space as people mingled, admiring the artwork that adorned the walls. Each piece told a unique story, contributed by artists who wanted to be part of this moment. Bold paintings celebrating Black culture stood alongside intimate photographs capturing quiet moments of resilience, creating a tapestry of representation as diverse as the crowd itself. Snoop stood near the entrance, his sharp suit tailored perfectly, observing the scene. His expression was a mix of satisfaction and awe as the space filled with life. Jason joined him, holding a glass of wine, his face alight with pride. "You see this?" Jason said, gesturing to the bustling crowd. "This is what it's all about." Snoop nodded, a small smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "Yeah, man, this is bigger than us. Look at all these folks coming together for something real." At the far end of the warehouse, a modest stage had been set for the evening's performances. The lineup was a reflection of the community's talent and diversity, featuring musicians, spoken word artists, and even a comedian who had volunteered to perform. Snoop had made sure that every element of the night celebrated the richness of their shared experiences, and the performers were ready to deliver. As the last guests arrived, Tina took to the stage. Her crimson dress flowed as she crossed the platform, commanding the room's attention. Her voice, amplified by the microphone, was both strong and inviting. "Good evening, everyone," she began, her words resonating through the space. "Tonight, we're not just here to share a meal, we're here to make a statement, to celebrate who we are, where we come from, and the beauty of our community. This isn't just a table, it's a movement." The crowd erupted into applause, cheers echoing through the room. Snoop stood to the side, pride swelling in his chest. Tina had a way of capturing the moment, giving voice to the emotions that so many were feeling. The dinner began shortly after. Chefs emerged from their makeshift kitchens, presenting dishes that reflected the rich cultural mosaic of the attendees. Platters of Nigerian jollof rice, Jamaican jerk chicken, Southern-style collard greens, Haitian griot, and other culinary masterpieces were placed on the tables, each dish a story in itself. Guests savored the flavors, exchanging laughter and stories as they shared the meal. Moved from table to table, greeting guests and listening to their experiences. At one table, an elderly man recounted being refused service at a diner decades earlier. His voice trembled with emotion as he said, "Tonight, this feels like healing, like we're finally being seen." At another table, a young woman admitted she had hesitated to attend, unsure if she would fit in. "But being here," she said, her voice filled with gratitude, "it's like I finally belong somewhere." Her words struck a chord with Snoop. This was exactly what he had envisioned, a space free of judgment where people could come together to celebrate their heritage and humanity. As the evening continued, the stage came alive with performances. A spoken word artist stepped up, her voice carrying raw emotion as she delivered a poem about resilience and defiance in the face of racism. The audience hung on her every word, erupting into thunderous applause as she finished. A jazz band followed, their soulful melodies filling the room with a sense of joy and connection. Tina found Snoop at one of the tables, her face glowing with pride. "Can you believe this?" she asked, glancing around the room. "We actually did it." Snoop nodded, his eyes scanning the crowd, filled with laughter, warmth, and hope. "Yeah," he said, his voice steady, "we did. And this is just the beginning." Jason approached with a bottle of champagne, his grin wide and contagious. "I say we toast to that, to the start of something bigger than all of us." The three clinked their glasses together, the faint sound drowned by the sea of laughter and conversation filling the room. For the first time in a long while, Snoop felt a deep sense of accomplishment, not for his fame or his music, but for creating something meaningful, something that truly mattered. As the evening reached its peak, Snoop took the stage, The room fell silent, all eyes turning toward him. His presence was commanding yet unassuming, and he paused for a moment, taking in the sight of everyone gathered before him. Tonight, he began, his voice steady and laced with emotion, we proved something. We proved that we don't need their approval to know our worth. We don't need their tables to feel like we belong. We built our own table, and this table? It's for everybody. The room erupted into thunderous applause, cheers ringing out as people stood to their feet. Faces glowed with pride, their expressions alive with hope. Snoop raised his hand, motioning for the crowd to settle as he continued. This isn't just about one night, he said, his voice growing stronger. This is about changing the game, about making sure no one, no matter where they come from or what they look like, ever feels like they don't belong. And let me tell you, we're just getting started. The cheers roared once more, the energy in the room reaching a fever pitch. Snoop stepped down from the stage, his heart pounding with a mix of adrenaline and determination. This night wasn't an end, it was the beginning of something far greater. As the event wound down, guests lingered, reluctant to leave the warmth and unity they had found. Snoop stood by the exit, shaking hands and hugging those who stopped to thank him. Each heartfelt word reaffirmed the significance of what they had accomplished together. When the last guest finally left, the warehouse stood quiet, the echoes of the night still reverberating through its walls. Snoop, Tina, and Jason remained, standing in the now empty space, their exhaustion eclipsed by a shared sense of triumph. We did it, Tina said softly, her voice thick with emotion. Snoop nodded, his gaze steady as he took in the room. Yeah, he said. And now, we keep going. The morning after the Table for All event, Los Angeles seemed to hum with a different energy. Social media was ablaze with photos and videos of the night before. Posts from attendees captured candid moments of joy, vibrant plates of food, and soulful performances. Hashtags like Table for All and We Belong trended across platforms, spreading the spirit of the event far beyond the city. But the attention wasn't all celebratory. Eminence Dining, the upscale restaurant that had turned Snoop and his friends away, found itself engulfed in a firestorm. Negative reviews flooded their pages on Yelp, Google, and other sites. Former customers shared stories of being ignored, mistreated, or outright rejected due to their appearance or race. The backlash was relentless. By midday, the restaurant issued another statement. Its tone was as polished and detached as the chandeliers in its dining room, filled with the same corporate language about misunderstandings and commitments to diversity. The hollow words only added fuel to the fire. Soon, former employees began to speak out, sharing their experiences anonymously. They described witnessing discriminatory policies that prioritized preferred clientele, those who fit the establishment's image, while subtly discouraging others. Some recounted management's indifference to complaints about racially insensitive practices. By evening, the restaurant's carefully constructed reputation was unraveling, piece by piece. Snoop sat in his living room, scrolling through his phone as the revelations continued to pour in. Tina and Jason were beside him, both engrossed in the cascade of posts and news articles. Crossing the street to stand behind the woman as she peered over her shoulder. "Check this out," Tina said, holding up her phone. A former server said they were told to seat black customers near the kitchen if they couldn't turn them away outright. Jason shook his head, a mix of anger and vindication in his expression. Man, they dug their own grave. Years of this nonsense, and now it's all out in the open. Snoop leaned back on the couch, his face unreadable. "It's wild," he said. "We didn't even have to do much. They exposed themselves." Tina turned to him, her voice soft but firm. "Yeah, but you sparked it, Snoop. That video you posted, it gave people the courage to speak up." He nodded, though his thoughts were elsewhere. This wasn't just about taking down a restaurant, it was about a much bigger issue. One that wouldn't be solved by a single scandal. Still, he couldn't deny the sense of justice in watching Eminence Dining finally face accountability. The following day, the backlash against Eminence Dining reached its peak. News outlets nationwide began covering the story, amplifying the voices of former employees and customers who bravely shared their experiences of discrimination. Footage from the Table for All event was prominently featured in reports, juxtaposed with the restaurant's shallow apologies. The contrast was glaring. One side represented unity and hope, while the other stood as a symbol of exclusion and elitism. One particularly damning news segment highlighted the restaurant's history of catering almost exclusively to a white clientele, despite being situated in one of the most diverse cities in the world. The report included testimony from a former chef who left Eminence Dining after being told that his dishes were too ethnic to fit their menu. The chef, now thriving at a community-based eatery, credited Snoop's event for giving him the courage to come forward. Snoop watched the coverage with mixed emotions. Pride swelled in his chest as he saw the positive impact of the event, but the sadness lingered, a stark reminder of how deeply rooted these issues were. He hadn't set out to dismantle Eminence Dining, but the truth about their practices was now impossible to ignore. That afternoon, the restaurant's owner held a press conference on the sidewalk outside the embattled establishment. Dressed in a tailored suit, his carefully crafted appearance exuded professionalism, but his words betrayed desperation. "We deeply regret the events of the past week," he began, his voice polished but strained. "Eminence Dining has always aimed to provide a welcoming environment for all our guests. We acknowledge that there have been times when we fell short, and for that we sincerely apologize." The reporters showed no mercy. They fired pointed questions about the employee testimonies, discriminatory seating policies, and the viral backlash. The owner fumbled through his answers, repeatedly citing vague commitments to improvement and promising mandatory diversity training for his staff. His attempt at damage control only fueled the fire. Online, social media users quickly mocked the press conference. Memes and commentary ridiculed the lack of accountability and transparency in the restaurant's statements. The public wasn't buying it, and the tide against Eminence Dining grew stronger. Later that evening, Jason stormed into Snoop's house, practically vibrating with excitement as he waved his phone. "They're done, man. Reservations are being canceled left and right. People don't even want to be seen there anymore." Snoop leaned back, smirking. "They thought they could throw out a few buzzwords and sweep it under the rug. People see through that now." Tina chimed in from her spot on the couch, scrolling through her phone. "It gets better," she said, satisfaction evident in her voice. "A couple of big-name celebrities have called them out directly. Their reputation's toast." Over the next week, Eminence Dining's downfall accelerated. Images of empty dining rooms flooded social media, a stark contrast to the once bustling restaurant. News broke that several high-profile investors had pulled their support, citing the repairable damage to the brand. Within days, rumors of the restaurant's impending closure began to circulate. Snoop observed it all unfold with a quiet sense of inevitability. He hadn't intended to destroy Eminence Dining, but their actions had set this chain of events in motion. Now they were facing the full weight of their consequences. One evening, Tina showed Snoop a message from a local activist group. It was brief but powerful, expressing gratitude for the light he had shown on an issue that extended far beyond one establishment. The message ended with a poignant statement: "You gave us a voice." Snoop reread the words, letting their significance sink in. This wasn't just about Eminence Dining anymore. It had become a catalyst for broader change, encouraging others to stand up and demand better. When the official announcement came that Eminence Dining would be closing its doors for good, it barely made headlines. By then, the public had moved on, inspired by the movement Snoop and his team had ignited. That night, Snoop drove past the now-abandoned restaurant. The lights were off, the windows bare. He pulled over and stepped out of his car, silently taking in the sight. Jason joined him a few moments later, his expression contemplative. "It's kind of poetic, isn't it?" Jason said softly. "They tried to keep us out, and now there's nothing left to keep anyone out of." Snoop nodded, his eyes fixed on the empty building. "Yeah," he said quietly. "But this ain't about them, it's about what we do next." The silence of the night enveloped them, filled with unspoken possibilities. The fall of Eminence Dining wasn't the conclusion of their story. It was the prologue to something far greater. Together, they had sparked a movement, and now it was time to keep building. That the movement was unnecessary and divisive. Others suggested it was just a fleeting trend, destined to fade. But Snoop, Tina, and Jason remained steadfast. They knew this wasn't about politics or fleeting popularity, it was about creating spaces where everyone could feel valued and included. Snoop addressed the criticism head-on in an interview on a popular talk show. Sitting across from the host, his voice was calm but resolute. "This isn't about excluding anyone," he explained. "It's about inclusion. It's about making sure everyone has a seat at the table." If you think that's divisive, maybe it's time to ask yourself why. The interview went viral, reigniting the momentum behind the movement. People who had initially been skeptical began to see the deeper meaning behind the dinners. They weren't just about food or music. They were about breaking down barriers, fostering understanding, and celebrating diversity. As the movement continued to grow, Snoop and his team faced logistical hurdles. Managing events in multiple cities required a level of coordination they hadn't initially anticipated. Tina worked tirelessly, creating a centralized hub to provide resources and guidance to local organizers. Jason secured partnerships with major brands that aligned with their mission, ensuring that the events could reach even more communities. One particularly memorable dinner was held in New York City, hosted in a historic Harlem theater. The event was a dazzling blend of old and new, with soul food classics served alongside innovative fusion dishes. A gospel choir opened the evening with a powerful performance, their voices echoing through the venue as guests settled into their seats. Local poets and storytellers shared their work, weaving tales of resilience and community that left the audience captivated. Snoop stood at the back of the room, taking it all in. Tina joined him, a glass of wine in hand. "This is it," she said, her voice filled with pride. "This is what we dreamed about." Snoop nodded, his gaze scanning the room. "And it's just the beginning." The success of the dinners began to ripple outward. Inspired by Table for All, other communities started organizing their own events, adapting the concept to address their unique challenges. In one Midwest town, a dinner focused on bridging divides between rural and urban residents. In another, a group of refugees hosted an event showcasing their native cuisines, using the platform to share their stories. The movement had become something much larger than Snoop had ever imagined. It was no longer just about righting the wrong he had experienced at Eminence Dining. It was about creating a legacy of unity, acceptance, and empowerment. One evening, back in Los Angeles, Snoop, Tina, and Jason gathered at a small cafe to reflect on how far they had come. Jason raised his glass, a grin spreading across his face. "Here's to proving them wrong. They said we couldn't do it, and now look at us." Tina smiled, but her expression was thoughtful. "It's not about proving them wrong," she said. "It's about showing what's possible." Snoop leaned back, a satisfied smile playing on his lips. "And we're not done yet. We've got more tables to build." The fall of Eminence Dining may have been the spark, but Table for All was the fire. A fire that burned with the promise of a brighter, more inclusive future. For Snoop, this was more than a movement. It was a mission. Together, they had turned exclusion into empowerment, transforming a moment of injustice into a lasting legacy. Snoop took a moment to soak in the energy of the room, the applause reverberating around him like a heartbeat. He stepped up to the microphone, his presence commanding yet humble, and allowed the noise to settle before speaking. "Good evening," he began, his voice steady, carrying the weight of the journey that had brought them here. "A year ago, we set out to prove something, that no one gets to tell us where we belong, that we can build our own tables, create our own spaces, and celebrate who we are without asking for permission." The crowd erupted into cheers, their applause echoing the sentiments in his words. Snoop raised a hand, signaling for quiet, as he continued. "But this ain't just about the food or the music. It's about what happens when we come together. It's about lifting each other up, about showing the world that unity and love are stronger than any wall they try to put between us." The audience was rapt, their eyes fixed on him as he spoke. Tina and Jason watched from the side of the stage, their expressions a mix of pride and awe. This wasn't just Snoop Dogg the artist or the celebrity. It was Snoop, the leader, the visionary, the voice of something much bigger than himself. "This movement," Snoop said, his voice deepening with emotion, "it started with one dinner, one table, and look at it now. We are in cities across the country, bringing people together, creating spaces where everyone feels seen and heard. But this ain't just my movement. It's yours. It's ours." The applause came again, louder this time, filled with passion and gratitude. Snoop smiled, the connection between him and the audience palpable. "We've got more work to do," he concluded. "But tonight, we celebrate. We celebrate how far we've come, and we get ready for what's next. Because this is just the beginning." The crowd rose to their feet, clapping and cheering as Snoop stepped back, his heart swelling with pride and hope. As he exited the stage, Tina and Jason greeted him with grins, clapping him on the back. "You killed it, man," Jason said, his voice brimming with excitement. "They're gonna remember this night forever." Tina nodded, her eyes shining. This is history in the making. The evening unfolded into a vibrant celebration of culture, resilience, and community. Guests savored dishes from chefs who had poured their hearts into every bite, while artists and performers shared pieces that spoke to the collective experience of triumph over adversity. Every moment felt significant, a testament to what could be achieved when people united around a shared purpose. As the night wore on, Snoop found himself at a table with a group of young activists. They spoke about their dreams, their struggles, and how Table for All had inspired them to believe in their own power to create change. One of them, a young woman with bright eyes and a determined smile, leaned forward. "You've shown us what's possible," she said. "Now, it's up to us to keep it going." Snoop nodded, feeling the truth of her words resonate deeply. "Y'all are the future," he said. "And as long as you carry this forward, the movement will never stop." By the time the evening drew to a close, the energy in the room was still electric. The connections formed stronger than ever. Snoop stood at the exit once again, thanking guests as they left, each handshake and hug a reminder of the impact they were making. When the last person had departed and the venue was quiet, Snoop, Tina, and Jason sat together, their exhaustion mingling with satisfaction. "This was bigger than we ever dreamed," Tina said softly, her voice filled with emotion. "And it's just the start," Jason added, lifting his glass. Snoop nodded, his gaze steady. "We ain't done yet, not by a long shot." As they sat there, the quiet of the night seemed to hold a promise. Table for All had grown into something powerful, a movement that would continue to ripple outwards, changing lives and creating spaces where everyone was welcome. It wasn't the end of the journey, it was only the beginning. Snoop took one last glance around the room, the table still echoing with laughter and conversation long after the guests had left. He stepped up to the microphone, the lights dimming as the crowd quieted for his final words. "Tonight," he began, his voice steady and full of conviction, "we didn't just share a meal, we proved something powerful. We proved that when people come together, when we share our stories, our culture, and our strength, we can build something extraordinary. This table, it's not just for us. It's for everyone who's ever been told they don't belong, for everyone who's ever been made to feel less. And as long as we keep building, there will always be a seat for anyone who needs it." The applause was immediate, rising like a wave through the room, filled with cheers and a standing ovation. Snoop stepped back, letting the energy wash over him, a small smile breaking across his face as he took in the faces of the crowd, each one reflecting hope, pride, and a shared sense of purpose. Tina and Jason stood nearby, their own expressions glowing with triumph. "That was perfect," Tina said, squeezing his shoulder as he stepped off the stage. "You set the tone for the future." As the applause began to fade and the lights brightened slightly, the evening slowly wound down. Chefs and performers mingled with guests, their faces alight with joy as they recounted the highlights of the night. The scent of lingering dishes mixed with the warmth of connection in the air, creating an atmosphere that felt alive, vibrant, and unshakable. Snoop moved through the room one last time, stopping at each table to shake hands, share a word of encouragement, and listen to the personal stories of those who had attended. A young man inspired by the movement spoke about opening a small cafe in his neighborhood, one that celebrated inclusivity. A mother, her teenage daughter, beaming at her side, shared how these dinners had given her family a renewed sense of pride in their heritage. "It's not just a dinner," the mother said, her voice heavy with emotion. "It's a reminder that we matter." Snoop nodded, his throat tightening as he listened. These were the moments that made everything worth it. The late nights, the backlash, the effort to keep the movement alive. This was the proof that their work wasn't just changing minds, it was changing lives. As the final guests departed, Snoop stood by the door, personally thanking each one. Their gratitude, their smiles, and their stories reaffirmed everything he and his team had set out to do. When the room was finally empty, he turned to Tina and Jason, the three of them standing among the remnants of a night that would be remembered for years. "We did it again," Tina said, her voice soft but filled with pride. "And it feels even bigger this time." Jason raised a glass, his grin as wide as ever. To the next one, he said, his voice brimming with optimism, and to every single person who makes sure this keeps growing. Max looked ahead. Her partner. They clinked their glasses together, their laughter filling the now quiet space. It was a moment of reflection, of triumph, and of understanding that their work was far from over. But they also knew this wasn't just their movement anymore. It belonged to everyone who had been a part of it, everyone who had shared their story, and everyone who had found a place at the table. Stepping outside into the cool night air, Snoop looked up at the stars, his thoughts racing but his heart steady. This was more than a dinner, more than a response to exclusion. It was a movement that had taken on a life of its own. It was a promise to keep fighting, to keep building, and to make sure no one ever felt like they didn't belong again. As he turned to Tina and Jason, he smiled. This isn't the end, it's just the beginning. Thank you for watching this story to the end. Snoop Dogg and his team transformed a moment of humiliation into a powerful movement, proving that unity and action can break down any barriers. If this story inspired you, be sure to subscribe to our channel for more incredible stories. Share this with someone who needs a little hope, and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Together we can keep building a table for all. See you in the next story.